You know, it's a strange thing how deeply family can wound us. Not with fists, not even with outright cruelty, but with little comments and casual dismissals that cut far deeper than we care to admit. My sister has always had this way about her. From the time we were young, she seemed to think she occupied some pedestal just above me, as if I were the clumsy shadow to her bright light. It didn't matter what I achieved or how hard I worked. Somehow she'd always find a way to poke fun at it, to downplay it, to remind me, with a smirk or a careless laugh, that in her eyes I was perpetually a little less. Maybe you've experienced something like that too. It starts small, the teasing at the dinner table, the jokes that everyone laughs at, including you, because it feels easier to go along than to let your hurt show. Then it grows. Over the years, it becomes a pattern. A story gets told over and over about how awkward you were at your first job interview, how you never quite measured up in school, or how your hobbies were cute. Nothing more. Little digs that get repeated at every family event until they're cemented into the family folklore. And you start to wonder if maybe that's all you are. Just a joke with your name on it. My sister perfected this art. She'd slip in sly jabs right in front of everyone, knowing they'd laugh. And why wouldn't they? It was all harmless fun, wasn't it? Just family teasing, except it didn't feel harmless. Each joke left a mark, like tiny paper cuts you can't quite see until one day you look down and realize you're bleeding all over. Still, I swallowed it, year after year, occasion after occasion, because that's what we're taught to do, isn't it? Keep the peace, don't make waves, laugh it off. But what really gnawed at me more than the embarrassment was how it shaped the way others saw me. When someone you're close to treats you like you're small, other people start to believe it too. They start to chuckle knowingly when your sister makes a joke, giving each other that look that says, "Oh yes, that's just how she is." They join in the story without even realizing they're doing it. And before long, you find yourself doubting your own worth, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you really are the family disappointment. And the worst part, you still crave their approval. Even knowing how my sister saw me, part of me kept hoping she'd turn around one day and say, "I'm proud of you." Or at least stop reminding everyone of my supposed shortcomings. It's a funny thing, the human heart, how it keeps reaching for love and acceptance from the very people who bruise it the most. So when I walked into that family gathering, knowing she'd be there, I braced myself. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter what she thought, that her opinion didn't define me. But it's hard to untangle years of longing from a single afternoon. And sure enough, it didn't take long before she found her chance to toss another barb my way, smiling as if it were the most natural thing in the world to mock your own sibling in front of a crowd. I laughed it off like always, but inside, it stung just as sharply as the first time. Little did either of us know that the tables were about to turn in a way that neither of us could have ever predicted. It was one of those warm afternoons when family decided to come together. Everyone packed into my parents' house, voices bouncing off the walls, laughter spilling from room to room. There was a long table stretched out on the patio, plates stacked high with home-cooked food, pitchers of iced tea sweating in the heat. It should have been the kind of gathering you look forward to, familiar faces, shared memories, people who know your story because they've lived it alongside you. But for me, there was always a small knot of tension winding tight in my chest the moment I stepped through the door, because I knew my sister would be there. And when she was around, I was never sure when the mood might shift from gentle teasing to outright ridicule. This time it started out light enough. My cousins swapped stories about their jobs, an uncle bragged about his new car, and someone put music on low. I sat near the end of the table, just close enough to join in, but far enough that I hoped I could slip by unnoticed. But it's funny, people like my sister have a radar for moments when they can turn the spotlight exactly where they want it. And sure enough, after a couple of glasses of wine, her voice rose above the hum of conversation, calling out to me with that syrupy sweetness she reserved for moments she was about to sharpen into something else. She started recounting some story from years ago about how I'd botched a speech at a school ceremony, stumbling over my words so badly that half the audience was embarrassed for me. At first I tried to smile. I even laughed a little, hoping if I played along, she'd let it drop, but she wouldn't. She leaned into it, adding details that weren't even true, embellishing just enough to draw bigger laughs. Soon the whole table was caught up in it. My aunt covered her mouth to hide a giggle. My cousin shook his head, smirking. It felt like the ground had tilted under me, and I was sliding helplessly toward some old, ugly humiliation I thought I'd left behind. What hurt wasn't just the memory itself. It was seeing how easily people slipped into her version of the story. How quickly they chose to laugh rather than pause to consider how it might feel for me, sitting right there, trying to keep my face from crumbling. Because that's the thing about these public little humiliations. They gather momentum. It's not enough that one person makes a joke. Soon everyone is adding their piece, each new laugh a little blade that cuts deeper. I wanted so badly in that moment to disappear, to find some excuse to get up, go inside, maybe hide in the kitchen until it was over. But my legs wouldn't move. I just sat there, smiling that practiced smile, nodding along as if I agreed with this twisted portrait of myself, because drawing attention to how hurt I was would only have given her more ammunition. And I'd learned long ago that showing pain was like showing a wolf your open throat. Then, as if on cue, my sister ended her story with a triumphant laugh and took a sip from her glass, looking around for validation. And she got it. People chuckled, some shook their heads, and a few gave me that pitying little smile that somehow managed to make me feel even smaller. I swallowed hard, trying to remind myself to breathe, willing the afternoon to just move on to the next topic. I had no idea that within minutes, everything was about to change, in a way that would silence every single laugh and leave my sister staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. In that moment, sitting there with my sister's laughter still echoing in my ears and the rest of the family smirking around the table, I felt a familiar urge rise up inside me, the desperate instinct to defend myself. I wanted to jump in, to protest, to remind them that her story was exaggerated, that it happened years ago and hardly mattered now. Part of me even wanted to fire back, to list off her own embarrassing moments, to pull her down the way she always seemed so eager to pull me down. It would have been so easy, and maybe for a split second, it would have felt good. But as I sat there, I took a slow breath. I looked around at all those faces, people I'd known my whole life, people whose opinions I once let shape the very core of how I saw myself. And it struck me I didn't have anything to prove to them. Their laughter didn't rewrite the truth of who I was. My sister's cheap stories didn't diminish the quiet pride I carried in the life I'd built, in the person I'd become despite years of being treated like the family's convenient punchline. I realized that jumping in to argue or lashing out with my own barbs would only drag me down to the very level I resented. It wouldn't heal anything. It would only feed the spectacle, so I chose silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from defeat, but the kind that stands firm, rooted in something deeper than the need for applause or validation. I sat back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and simply let my sister's words hang there. Let them twist in the air without my help. And it was hard, harder than snapping back, harder than pretending to laugh along, because it meant sitting fully in my discomfort, letting everyone see me without my usual mask of forced amusement. But there was also something oddly powerful in that choice. By not playing along, by refusing to throw fuel on her fire, I took away the energy she thrived on. The conversation lost a bit of its gleeful edge. People shifted in their seats, glancing between us. A few cleared their throats, suddenly aware of how mean-spirited it had all become. My sister laughed again, but it sounded thinner this time, like she was trying to keep something alive that was already dying. Inside, I reminded myself of all the small victories my sister had never bothered to notice. The times I'd stood up for others when it was hard, the kindnesses I'd offered without expecting anything back, the quiet moments of resilience that had nothing to do with showy success or funny anecdotes. Those were the things that made me who I was. They weren't flashy, they didn't earn roaring laughter around a table, but they were real, and no smirk, no mocking story could take them from me. Holding my tongue didn't mean I was weak. It meant I trusted that the truth of who I was didn't need to be shouted over someone else's petty need for attention. I sat there, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to show that I was still here, still standing, still whole, even if my sister couldn't see it. And though I couldn't have predicted it at the time, that choice to sit there in quiet strength, to let her words fade without my resistance, opened the door for a moment I would remember for the rest of my life, a moment that would show everyone at that table exactly who I was without a single word from me. I was still sitting there, caught somewhere between wanting to melt into my chair and fighting to hold on to my quiet composure, when something shifted in the air. It was subtle at first. A few heads turned toward the driveway. The chatter at the far end of the table died down, and then there was this collective pause that seemed to sweep over the whole gathering. I glanced up, half expecting someone to announce dessert, grateful for anything to change the subject. But instead, I noticed my sister straightening up in her chair, her eyes widening just slightly, a proud little smile beginning to curve across her lips. And that's when I saw him, her son, Michael, still in his pilot's uniform. He'd just pulled in, climbing out of his car with that crisp, disciplined posture that always made people take notice. Even at a distance, he radiated a quiet confidence. The sun caught the brim of his cap, the badges on his chest gleaming. I could practically feel the ripple of admiration moving through the family. A few of my cousins immediately started whispering, elbows nudging, necks craning for a better look. Michael was the family's golden boy. Smart, disciplined, ambitious, everything my sister loved to highlight, especially when she could use it to contrast how differently she'd raised him, how proud she was. And truthfully, I couldn't blame her. He was impressive. Seeing him there in full uniform, fresh off duty, brought a swell of pride even to my own chest, unrelated to his mother's constant boasting. It was hard not to admire him. My sister, of course, basked in the attention. I watched her smooth down her hair, her grin stretching wider, her whole posture shifting like she was preparing to receive some grand acknowledgement of her motherhood. It was her moment, or so she clearly believed. Everyone seemed to expect that Michael would make a beeline straight to her, scoop her into one of those proud homecoming hugs you see in military family videos, and the evening would shift into fresh admiration for her and her son. But something else happened. Michael did walk briskly toward us, his steps confident, eyes scanning the table, only they weren't searching for her. They landed right on me. For half a second, I thought I must be mistaken. My hands fidgeted in my lap, unsure of what to do, but there was no confusion in his gaze. He walked directly to where I sat, his shadow falling over me, and then, in a move so deliberate and unmistakable, It seemed to suck all the breath out of the patio. He stopped, snapped to attention, and gave me a crisp, formal salute. It was like time slowed. The laughter, the teasing, the half-hidden smirks, all of it evaporated in an instant. I felt every pair of eyes lock on us. My sister's face froze mid-smile, the color draining from her cheeks as she realized this moment. This dramatic, honor-filled gesture wasn't for her. It was for me. Michael held that salute for what felt like forever, his expression steady, eyes meeting mine, with a respect so profound it almost undid me. Slowly, awkwardly, I rose to my feet. I didn't know the protocol, didn't know quite how to respond, but I managed a small nod, my throat too tight for words. And just like that, he lowered his hand, his face breaking into a warm grin as he reached out to give me a firm handshake, pulling me in for a brief, heartfelt embrace. The patio was silent. No one laughed. No one dared to. Because in that simple, powerful act, Michael had done what years of my own words never could. He'd shown them all who I was, without needing me to defend myself or tear anyone else down. Standing there in Michael's embrace, it was almost as if the world around us blurred for a moment. I could still feel the weight of all those eyes on me, my family, who just minutes before had been content to laugh at my expense, now watching with an awkward silence that said more than any apology ever could. When Michael finally stepped back, he rested a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze as if to steady me. And in truth, I needed that, because inside, my heart was racing so wildly, I thought I might actually sway where I stood. Then, without saying a single word to his mother, to the others, to anyone, he turned back to me, squared his shoulders, and offered that sharp, respectful salute once more. Only this time, it felt even heavier with meaning, deliberate, personal. His eyes didn't waver. They held a warmth, a kind of unspoken gratitude that went far beyond simple family obligation. And suddenly I realized that all those years I'd spent thinking no one noticed how I carried myself, that my kindness, my quiet efforts to support the family, the small sacrifices I made behind the scenes had all been invisible. I was wrong. He had seen it, maybe more than anyone else. I finally managed a smile, one that felt a little shaky at first, but then grew stronger as I met his gaze fully. And for that instant it was like we were the only two people there. He dropped his salute and simply said, in a voice low enough that only I could hear, "Thank you for everything." Just those few words, but they cracked something open inside me that I'd kept tightly locked away for years. The deep, hidden longing to be seen and valued, not for showy accomplishments, but for the kind of steady, quiet love that truly shapes people. When Michael finally turned to greet the rest of the family, the shift in the air was almost palpable. People were fidgeting, clearing their throats, exchanging small looks that spoke volumes. Even my sister seemed thrown off balance, her earlier smug confidence replaced by a tight, uncertain smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She tried to pull Michael into her own hug, tried to steer the moment back to her narrative of maternal pride, but it was too late. Everyone had witnessed it, that clear, unmistakable sign of respect directed squarely at me. It had landed in the middle of our family dynamic like a small earthquake, quietly but irrevocably altering the ground we all stood on. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "See, this is what real respect looks like." I simply sat back down, feeling a calm spread through me that I hadn't felt in years. My hands were still trembling slightly under the table, not from fear or shame this time, but from the sheer release of all that tension I'd carried so long. It was as if, in that one unexpected salute, Michael had lifted a burden off my shoulders that I'd been dragging behind me since childhood. Later, the conversation started up again, a bit more subdued. The laughter returned, though it was softer now, tinged with a new, wary kind of awareness. My sister still tried to reclaim the center of attention, but the edge of her mockery had dulled. She kept glancing my way, perhaps trying to gauge how much had really changed. And the truth was, everything had. Because from that day on, no one at that table would ever again be able to pretend that I was just the family joke. It's funny how life sometimes chooses the perfect moment to reveal the quiet truths we spend years hoping someone will finally see. In the days and weeks after that gathering, I found myself replaying the moment over and over in my mind. Michael's salute, the way the patio fell so silent you could have heard a pin drop. The look on my sister's face, that stunned, almost childlike confusion, like the world had just tipped sideways and she couldn't figure out how to right it. I thought about how quickly everything had shifted, how in just a few seconds a whole lifetime of being quietly dismissed and underestimated was somehow appended. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what truly mattered wasn't the shock on my sister's face or even the hushed awe of the rest of the family. It was what that gesture said about respect, the kind of respect that isn't flashy or demanded, but quietly earned day by day, often without anyone noticing. The truth is, I hadn't done anything extraordinary to deserve that salute. I hadn't rescued Michael from danger or funded his education or performed some grand heroic act. All I had done was be there, year after year, in small, steady ways that apparently meant far more to him than I'd ever understood. I thought back to the countless family dinners where I'd made sure Michael's favorite dish was on the table, the late-night conversations when he was younger and wrestling with decisions about his future, the times I'd defended him gently when his mother's ambitions started to weigh too heavily on his shoulders. None of it felt particularly remarkable at the time, just quiet moments of showing up, listening, offering kindness without expecting recognition. But in the end, those were the things that built a bridge of trust and admiration strong enough for Michael to stand on years later, in front of everyone, and honor me in a way I never could have imagined. My sister, I realized, had always believed respect was something you demanded through image and control, telling the loudest stories, flaunting the biggest successes, making sure everyone knew exactly where she stood above the rest of us. But real respect doesn't work that way. It isn't coerced or performed. It grows quietly in the hearts of others when they see how you treat people, how you hold your principles even when no one's applauding, how you extend grace and patience without keeping a mental scoreboard. It's earned not by insisting on your own importance, but by making others feel seen and valued. That was the deepest lesson for me. For so long, I'd measured my worth through the eyes of people like my sister, thinking that because they couldn't see me, truly see me, I must not be worth much. I'd let her jokes shape my reflection in the family mirror, never realizing that someone else was looking at me all along with eyes full of quiet appreciation. Michael's salute didn't just honor me, it freed me. It untangled years of small doubts, made me understand in one bright, breathtaking moment that living with quiet integrity matters, even if it goes uncelebrated for most of your life. Since that day, I've carried myself a little differently, not with arrogance or smugness, but with a soft inner certainty. I no longer shrink when my sister tries to steer conversations back to her, or slips in one of her sly remarks. I don't need to argue or correct her, because I finally understand that the people who truly matter will always see beyond the noise. They'll notice the substance beneath the surface. And if you're lucky, every once in a while, life will give you a moment so clear, so unexpected, it erases all the old doubts in an instant and leaves you standing taller than ever before.